Hi. I see some familiar faces and some new faces. Yeah, as Samantha said, I work for the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. I was a wildlife biologist for about 20 years. I still consider myself one, but recently I took a new job as a wildlife education specialist. And so I'm working more with wildlife safety and things like that, but I really like doing bat presentations. Okay, so I will begin. Today, of course, I'm going to talk about bats. I'll have like a bigger umbrella, bats in general, and then focus in on bats in Alaska, and then focus in more on bats to South Central Alaska. Okay, so I'd like to identify some bat basics in the beginning, and I'd like to dispel some bat myths. A lot of people think that bats are blind, but actually they can see quite well as we can. Bats do not suck blood, but we do have 3 species of vampire bats. I think they're all in South America. And they don't suck blood. Sorry, I should have had this open. I'm trying to open. I have a skull of one I want to show you. So this is, I'm going to hold it up. This is a skull of a vampire bat. I don't know if you can see it. And they have 2 little incisors here. And what they do is they'll cut you with those incisors, and they have an anticoagulant. And then they just lap up your blood. They don't suck blood. They'll lap it up like a dog or a cat drinking water. And then all they take about, I think I read 2 tablespoons of blood. And usually it's from domestic animals such as goats and cows. Bats are not attracted to human hair. I always was told when I grew up in the upper Midwest that they were attracted to your hair, and watch out, they'll get caught in your hair. But no, they're not attracted to your hair. Some people think bats are related to mice. And the German word for mouse is Fledermaus, and I can't say it quite right. If my husband were watching, he'd be probably just upset that I slaughtered it, but it means flying mouse, basically. And bats are more closely related to us than they are to mice or rodents. Bats may carry rabies. There's not a lot of rabies that was found in Alaska. We had some testing done for quite a few years, and the only bats with rabies were in southeast Alaska. But with that said, like any other wild animal, leave it alone. If you see one, don't touch it with your bare hands. Treat it like it does have rabies, because you never really know. Okay. And so bats are in the order of Chiroptera. And there's 2 suborders. There's Megachiroptera, which means large bat, and Microchiroptera, or small bats. And so I wanted to put this in perspective about the biodiversity, so I put this slide together not too long ago. There are 1,070 species of Microchiroptera and 170 species of Megachiroptera. That equals to about 1,240 bat species in the world and 43 in North America. So there are 55 deer species in the world, 36 Canidae species, and 8 bear species. That kind of puts it in perspective of how many bat species we have. The biodiversity of bats is great. I just threw this slide together before the presentation. I realized I didn't have any bat facts. So the smallest bat species is a little, I think it was a little boy that asked me this question last time. I knew what the smallest, but not the largest. So the smallest bat species is the bumblebee bat, and it weighs about, it's about the weight of 2 paper clips or 2 grams. So it's really tiny, and it's probably the smallest mammal in the world, at least that we know of. The largest bat species is the giant golden-crowned flying fox. It's got a wingspan of about 5.5 feet, so just about almost my wingspan or my arm span. So it's huge. It only weighs about 2.6 pounds, and that's because of flight. They have to keep their bodies small. They're really long-lived, so bats can live to be about 10 to 20 is more typical, but there was a bat caught in Siberia called a Brandt's myotis. And that bat had, when you capture bats, you put a little tag on, a metal tag on, that has an identification number. So that bat had been caught for the first time over, no, it was 41 years prior to being caught the second time. There's also been species of bats that, same method, they've been recaught 30 plus years. So they're quite long-lived. They are the only mammal that can fly. A lot of people say, wait, hey, what about the flying squirrel? But of course they can't fly. They don't have true flight. They actually glide. They're also really cool because they use echolocation to find their food. Oh yeah, and I didn't know this fun fact until today. I was just kind of looking around, and the Brazilian free-tailed bat is the fastest flyer in the animal kingdom. It's been clocked at just under 100 miles per hour. So that's really cool. Now in this picture in the slide is the picture of a Brazilian free-tailed bat. Chiroptera actually means hand wing. They have the same bones in their wings as humans have in their hands. So you can see like the green are the finger bones, and these are the finger bones. And so it's kind of all related to that. It's kind of cool. And it's cool to compare it to a bird. Their flight is very distinctive. They fly at slower speeds typical when they're going after insects, and they're more maneuverable. And so I don't know if there are any, I think I see a couple of kids. If there are any kids here, if you put your hand on your hip and imagine your fingers going down below your leg or below your feet, their hands or their fingers are longer than their legs, which is pretty cool. Let's see something, I'm just checking the time. 70% of all bats eat insect. Tropical bats eat fruit, and they also drink nectar. Less than 1% of bats are carnivorous, and 3 species of bats feed on blood. Like I said, the vampire bat. So these are the feeding strategies. Insect-eating bats are insectivorous. Bats that eat frogs or mice or other bats are carnivorous. Okay. Fish-eating bats are piscivorous. Sorry, my mouse is going a little nuts on me. There we go. Nectar-eating bats are nectivorous, and fruit-eating bats are frugivorous. Blood-eating bats, the vampire bats, are sanguinivorous. And we can talk a little bit about echolocation. Bats find food by producing sound waves that come from their mouth or their nose, and so these echolocations, they go out, they touch whatever it is, and they come back, and they can hear it. But they can detect things as small as a human hair by doing this. They can also, it's really interesting, some insects can block this somehow so that the bats can't get them. Kind of cool. There are a lot of threats to North American bats and other bats. So one of them are wind turbines. About, 600 to 900,000 bats are killed. This is a new study that's been out. It's estimated that many have been killed per year because of wind turbines. So that's quite a bit. Pesticides are bad for bats. Pesticides that are used for insects, the insects can get into contact with the pesticide. The bat eat the insects, and the pesticides can bioaccumulate into their system and kill them. Human disturbances are a really big issue too. So let's say you have a maternity roost in your house, and let's say it's a big one, it's building every year, and you want to get rid of them, and so you take off the roof or replace it so that you don't get any more bats. But if you do it at the wrong time of the year, and if you have a maternity roost, you're going to have probably a lot of dead baby bats in your house. So there are ways to deal with this. I will recommend, and I'll have this on a slide later, but it's Bat Conservation International is a great place to look if you have problems with bats in your house, and just how to deal with it, when to deal with it, things like that. Also, habitat destruction. So logging can take a lot of structure, a lot of habitat away from the bats, so they don't have places to roost. And it's likely when they go and seek out houses or other human structures. But the biggest threat by far is white nose syndrome. I took it was a workshop in Pennsylvania when I first started at ADF&G as a biologist, and At that time, white nose syndrome was just starting to really capture everybody's attention. And so this first time I heard about it, and so the instructors were talking about wind turbines and all this other stuff. And then it was kind of ominous. They started talking about white nose syndrome. So when I took that workshop, it was back in 2009. I hope you guys can see this. But this map, it shows you the little circle by New York. That's where it originated. I took the class in 2009, so that's where the green, kind of the bluish green is. That's where white nose syndrome was found. And so you can see it spread a lot since I've taken that class. And it jumped in about 2015, it jumped all the way from, it looks like North Dakota to Washington. So I was on a bat working group committee, and so before that happened, we thought we had a couple of years, or maybe 5 more years to really worry about whether it's coming up, but still we were trying to make plans of what to do and how to deal with white nose syndrome. And then we had this big jump, and everybody kind of panicked. So as of now, we don't have white nose syndrome in Alaska. So what is white nose syndrome? The Pseudogymnoascus destructans, and it's a fungus. It's a cold-loving fungus. It lives in caves where bats hibernate. So it likes the same conditions that bats do to hibernate. It spreads from bat to bat. So bats like to, when they hibernate, at least in caves and in mines, they hibernate in these huge clumps. And there, if you've ever seen a picture of it, there's like lots and lots and lots of bats in this little area. So they're touching each other through hibernation. And so it's spread very quickly that way. Now what happens with white nose syndrome is the bats will wake up during hibernation. And when you wake up from hibernation, it's very energetically expensive. So they use up a lot of calories to wake up, and then they go back into hibernation. And if they repeatedly wake up throughout the winter, they're going to use up their fat stores. Bats do naturally wake up a few times because they have to drink some water, and usually the water is just on their pelt because it's so damp in these areas. But white nose syndrome, or this fungus, makes them wake up quite a bit more. So they wake up in the spring, and they know that they're not going to survive. So they go out in the spring or even early or late winter, and they start looking for food. And of course, there's no insects around. And so bats are found a lot of times right outside of their mines or caves, dead. I don't know how many of you have seen pictures of the devastation and just dead bats all over the areas. So why should I care about bats? Why do people care about bats? There actually was a study to see how much bats will save in pest management for farmers, and it's all for free. And it says, the study says millions of dollars are saved in pest management because of bats. Also, if you don't like being eaten by mosquitoes, one insectivorous bat can eat thousands of bugs, mosquito-sized bugs in one single night. They're pollinators of flowers and dispersers of seeds, so that's really important. And they're, like I mentioned earlier, a huge part of the planet's biodiversity, so 25% actually. It's quite a bit. Oops. Just checking the time, making sure I'm not going too fast or too slow. So let's talk more about Alaskan bats. So we have the California bat, the long-legged bat, the silver-haired bat, which this is a picture of a silver-haired bat. They're really, really beautiful bats. We have a Yuma bat, and just recently in southeast Alaska, biologist Karen Blavis and Tori Rhodes of Fish and Game put out a lot of bat recorders, and they got a distinctive call of the hoary bat, which is, if you remember, I don't think I had that slide. They're a carnivorous bat, and they're beautiful. And we also have what I consider our bat is the little brown bat. That's what we have here. It's the only bat known to breed in South Central and North and West, I guess, non-Southeast areas. But with that said, I had some recorders running for quite a few years, and in Palmer, I have a citizen scientist running a bat recorder, and we detected a new to our area bat, and we think it's a California bat, but it was only one call. And so with my old position, they hired somebody on temporarily to run the citizen science bat program. And she hasn't gone through the data yet to see if they got another hit on this California bat. So that's kind of cool. You may wonder, sorry, I don't know if you see that. How do we catch bats? And well, we put up what's called a mist net. I don't know if this is going to work now. It worked earlier. And so I thought it'd be fun to show you how we catch bats and how we get them out of the nets. And so this was from about 4 years ago. We were doing some bat captures up near, I think it was near Fairbanks. And so if you don't know what a mist net, it's very fine netting. You can see it here. You can also see the mosquitoes flying around my hands. And they're feisty, they like to bite. That one was actually pretty tangled up. And then once we catch them, we weigh them, and we take measurements and all that kind of stuff. We put a band on them, and then we let them go. So we have a lot of questions about bats. And although we're starting to tease out some of these questions and building a bigger picture about knowledge of bats in Alaska, but we really don't know where they're found. We don't know how many bats we have. We don't know where they overwinter, at least not here. And sorry about that. Can you hear that video when I play it? Could you hear the squeaks? Yeah, I was wondering about that. I'm not sure how I can get that so that you can hear it. So what are we doing for our bats? Quite a bit in light of white nose syndrome. People are studying bats quite a bit more. Like I mentioned, our southeast counterparts, they've actually been finding that bats do overwinter in scree slopes and root wads. It's kind of cool. Okay, so we ran a 10-year citizen science program, and we actually wrote a manuscript and published it. The publication is called New Insights of the Distribution, Ecology, and Overwintering Behavior of the Little Brown Myotis in Alaska. And it was published in a peer-reviewed journal called Northwestern Naturalist. So I want to present a few of the results of this. Okay, so on the left you can see the image of Alaska. The hatched area is actually the previous known range of little brown bats. The dots are citizen science observations throughout the state. They would call and give me a location, and then I would map it in GIS. So you can see there are some locations of little brown bats that's outside of the hatched area. And so their distribution, we now know that they're further west or further north, and even in the Samiti Islands, so they're further south than what we thought. On the right side, we show maternity roosts, and the solid star are maternity roosts that we defined as being 12 or more bats, because non-breeding females and males will roost mostly by themselves or maybe one or two other bats. But maternity roosts, they like to be warm, so they want to clump up. And so that's how we defined it. But the hollow, I guess, star is where there were pups verified. Some more data. So the bats were found in some natural substrates. One was found in a rock crevice, 2 are found in trees. But with that said, human beings aren't necessarily going to be around to see these bats to call us, but they will be around to human structures, of course. And so this is quite a bit biased. And since this publication, A Gale bat biologist, Jessica Reimer, found that some maternity roosts of bats in cottonwood trees. So that's really cool. But yeah, they're found in houses, buildings, cabins, bat houses, barns, and a lot of umbrellas, which is kind of interesting, lodges, sheds, or other. And you can see the numbers, 52 are in houses, 18 in buildings, and so on. There's also, I don't see it here, but there was also one on a sailboat. That must have missed that. Okay. So this is what a bat recorder looks like. There's all different kinds. We did use this one. We used a few different models. And so we actually just finished a manuscript on some citizen science data, but it's on bat recording data. So this is from 2015 through 17 and 2019. In 2018, we had some big projects that were brand new that I was working all the time, and I just could not maintain them. So we could not get any data from 2018 that was worth looking at. The black dots on this image are the locations where we had bat recorders. And so you can see, oh, sorry about that. So if you see the top dot, that's where the left to the top dot, the second to the top. That is where we had what appears to be a California bat call. Okay, so bear with me with this next slide. It looks really complicated, so I will try to break it down for you. So, okay, let's look at the right. The square with the white in it is less than 0.5 calls per hour, and it goes up to the dark square, the black one. That will be more than 25 bat calls per hour. So the y-axis, you see time of night, with 24 being midnight. And then on the x-axis, you'll see the date. And on the on the z-axis, you're going to see temperature. Let's do this. So you can see in the graph on the top, let's go and keep moving your faces around so I can see the graph. Sorry about that. So you can see this is right here, solstice. So before, you can see bats are coming on the landscape already in March. They're leaving as late as even into October, even into early November. So they're staying here a very, very long time. They're coming really early in the spring, leaving really late in the fall, which is kind of giving us the idea that they probably are overwintering close by. You can see, so that after solstice, you'll see there's a lot more bats on the landscape. You can also see that they're coming in, or they're coming out while it's still light out, and they're leaving, some of them, after dark, which is pretty cool. And so what is the meaning of this? Is probably because the pups start to fly after solstice. And so there's more bats on the landscape. And the pups are trying to learn to be bats. So they probably don't quite realize, although this is even in early spring when pups aren't flying yet, there's still some out there, but more so here. So I think a couple things are happening. One is that the mother bats are, they're post-lactating, so they need to build up a lot of fat so that they can survive the winter. So they're likely taking advantage of this more daylight time. And also the pups on the landscape, they're probably flying early and leaving a little late. So the third thing is, this is the temperature. So look to the right. So I don't know, can you see my arrow moving around? Oh, you can, good. So this is the temperature, and this dotted line is 0 degrees. And so if you compare this to this up here, so once it gets to be about 0, that's the centigrade, 0 degrees, they're starting to come in. And then as it gets warmer, they all come in. And then as it gets cooler, they start to leave. So this, especially -5 degrees centigrade, seems to be pretty important for probably bats cueing when to come and when to leave. And so where do our bats overwinter? Well, in Norway, bats have been found to overwinter in scree fields. In Colorado, they hibernate in boulder fields. In Southeast Alaska, like I mentioned, they will hibernate in root wads and scree fields. In South Central Alaska, like I mentioned, they come early and they leave late. And so the picture of the bat on the right is a bat. There were two geologists that were out in Petersville, and they saw a rock outcropping and they wanted to take a sample of it. And so they walked up to it and they broke off a piece of rock and found this little bat in there. So, I mean, it was below freezing, there was snow on the ground. I would like to argue that that bat's probably overwintering. And there was also a bat in a library in Anchorage, and I was called a librarian. And it was, I think it was April 14th, she called me. And she said, you know, I saw a bat and it looks like it just started waking up. And I asked her what she did, and she said she brought it outside. So hopefully that bat made it, I don't know. But as I was mentioning, bats, they come out so early and they stay so late. So yeah, I think that they are overwintering. When I first started working with bats, I didn't believe this at all. I thought it was too cold. There's no way they can do that. So what are the implications of white nose syndrome and overwintering behavior? So in the lower 48, bats will hibernate in huge groups to thermoregulate, keep their body temperatures warm enough so that they can stay hibernating. Hibernating, it can't be too warm, they can't be too cold. If it's too warm, they wake up. If it's too cold, they'll wake up. And they tend to move around in the mines if the temperature changes. So we don't know what our bats do in the winter. If they're not clumping in big groups, white nose syndrome may not be a huge issue here. At least that's what I like to think. So you might wonder what you can do for our bats. So my position, my old position for the Threatened, Endangered, and Diversity Program is being filled now. I left the position in February, and so they had a bunch of applications, and they're going to be interviewing coming up. But right now there is not a wildlife biologist that took my place. There was somebody that was hired short term to do this work. But what you can do is you can build a bat house, and Bat Conservation International, that's the website that I mentioned earlier. You can find all kinds of things about bats on the site. So I do encourage, if you like bats, even if you don't like bats, get on this website and just tour it. It's really fascinating. So if you Google Bat Conservation International Bat House, it'll take you right to that link. And yeah, there's instructions. It tells you what color to paint the bat house, where to place the bat house, how high, things like that. And so I imagine they're going to continue the citizen science program. And so I have my former boss's name on here, Katie Christie. I have her contact, so that you may want to inquire with her later about citizen science projects, and if you're interested in doing that. If you find a maternity roost, again, please give Katie Christie a call. If they have hired my new position, she'll just send the new person's email address to you. And also, if you want to run a bat recorder, I'm not sure how the funding situation is going to be and if they're going to be able to buy more bat recorders, but that is a possibility. So when I first started the job, nobody really knew of bats staying in bat houses. And so somebody sent me this picture of a multi-chamber bat house for Brooks Camp. And so they have a very well-established colony of bats out there, which is really cool. Okay, I have plenty of time for questions.
So there are a couple of questions that came through while you were talking.
Okay.
First, I think Timothy might be best able to ask his question out loud if he'd like to unmute and ask about bat diversity and umbrellas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Marian. My name is Timothy. I'm a volunteer here at the Eagle River Nature Center.
Okay, I think I met you.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
So yeah, I'm wondering, I was thinking, at least like the umbrella fabric almost seems like a little bit like maybe, I don't know, the wing of a bat, like that kind of a fabric. I don't, or material or something. I'm wondering, why would umbrellas be a place for that?
That's a really good question. And sometimes bats will wrap their wings around their body to keep warm, but a lot of times the umbrellas might be a dark color, and so they might, and they can go. They're folded when they go in there, so it's almost like a little like tree roost or something maybe, and they crawl up in there, and it's nice and warm, so they like that. But I'm not really sure. My mother she lives in Michigan, she used to call me a lot when she'd have bats in her umbrellas, but she says since white nose syndrome, she doesn't have bats in the umbrella anymore. Kind of sad.
I have a quick other second question.
Okay.
You mentioned something about bats represent 25% of biodiversity on the planet.
Yes.
That's unbelievable. I mean, like a whole quarter of our diversity is bats.
Yep. And that would be animals.
Wow.
For mammals. Yeah. Sorry about that. I should have clarified
mammals.
that.
Okay.
Does that make more sense?
So it's of all the mammals on Earth, bats represent 25% of the biodiversity.
Yep.
Wow. Thank you so much for doing this.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining.
Christine also had a question saying kind of when you were talking about where bats overwinter, and it was Norway. Our bats go that far? So can you speak about bats in Norway?
To clarify, our bats do not go there, but I'm trying to make a correlation or the argument that our bats can probably do the same thing that like little myotis will do in Norway. So if their bats are in boulder fields or scree fields, why can't our bats do the same? Sorry for the confusion, Christine.
I think with that, does anybody else have any questions for Marian? You can either unmute or type them in the chat box.
Marian, you said what are you said screet fields? What are those?
They're like talus slopes, so rocky sort of areas, and they can just go really, I think, quite deep into that because they need water in order to survive the winter. So they're getting far enough in that they're getting water.
So they dig into a rocky shelf?
No, so if you imagine, I don't know, let's say a rock field, and if you look in there, the rocks are piled on each other, but there's little holes that they can go into. Okay. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, any more questions? You can also email me with questions. Sam, do you think you could send my email address to them?
Absolutely. In the meantime, special shout out to Ravenwood. It sounds like Ravenwood Elementary students are going to learn all about bats this week.
Oh, wow.
Christine also asks, do people know how far they migrate?
In the lower 48, I've read 300 plus miles. And so that's kind of what I was wondering here is, that's pretty far. Could they be hibernating on like Kodiak Island where it's the winters are a lot more mild, or maybe our bats are going to southeast Alaska? But I'm suspecting because of the timing that that I told you about them coming so early, leaving so late, I'm thinking that at least some of our bats are overwintering here. And because of the little brown bat that the geologists just like, oh, look at that rock, and they took a little rock off and there's a bat there. So there could be a lot of bats there. They just, just found the one, but I bet there's a lot.
Naturalist Emeritus Uta Olson asks, in reference to the temperatures on the graph, are they active as soon as it gets above freezing?
It seems like it. And I remember when I first started, there was a graduate student named Rachel Snively, similar to my name, and she was working up north on bats. She was doing her master's degree. And I asked her the question, when do your bats leave? She says, as soon as it falls below freezing, they leave. And that seems to be the case. Thanks, Uda.
Well, all right. Marian, thank you so much for spending time with us today. I appreciate your time and energy.
And thank you, everybody.
And if you ever need to reach out to Marian, I wrote it in the chat box, but it's marian.snively@alaska.gov. She's pretty easy to find. So.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good afternoon.
Yeah, happy Halloween, everyone.
Oh, yeah, happy Halloween. Oh, I wore my bat earrings just for this.
Excellent. And Carlene, yes, details will be available on our website and Facebook page for how to watch this later. So,
Okay.
with that, all right. Thank you so much, Marian. And with that, I'm gonna end the meeting.
Okay, Samantha, you want to stay on for a minute?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. Bye.